Today, I'm going to be joined with my guest, Zara Oteng, writer and blogger whose work is centered around female identity, motherhood, and mental health. Zara found herself struggling to write for 2 years and recently discovered that she had been struggling with imposter syndrome. Her latest essay on her blog talks about her difficult experience with imposter syndrome. She's here today to talk about her journey and experiences with imposter syndrome. Please welcome Zara Oteng.
Thank you so much, Zara. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you for coming and being so brave as well to talk about imposter syndrome. I mean, I think it affects more people than you even know, even people's favorites on social media, Instagram, even celebrities as well, the greats. A lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome, you know.
For sure. It's such a common experience, and that's what I'm finding. I mean, I've heard about imposter syndrome so many times. All of us have. It's a huge part of the popular discourse, especially in women's circles and on women's platforms. But I didn't actually realize it was something that was in fact impacting me so severely until quite recently, actually. And then I wrote about it.
Yeah, which is really brave. I just want to just talk about imposter syndrome for just anybody that doesn't know, because we're assuming that everybody knows what imposter syndrome is. I mean, I went to my sister's job yesterday and I was telling her I was going to be talking to someone about imposter syndrome, and she's like, "Oh, well, what's that? Is that when people are like the talented Mr. Ripley, Con?" I'm like, no, not con artist.
Not an actual imposter. Not an actual imposter.
Exactly. There's a difference, okay? It's not an actual imposter, but imposter syndrome is a psychological experience in where you sort of fear inadequacies despite the genuine success and evidence actually being there. So you might actually be very good at what you're doing. You might actually have achieved a lot of success and recognition in what you're doing, but there's an internal sort of voice going on, a psychological experience or occurrence that's happening at the same time, despite the fact that you may be seeing evidence saying that you are that thing. You have been successful in that thing. You just can't get over this story that you keep telling yourself that I'm an imposter 100%. Any second now.
People are going to find out who I am. People are going to find out who I really am. No, definitely. And it's something that overwhelmingly impacts women. That's not to say, just from my research, because I'm no expert. This is something that I've become very interested in because it's something that, as I said before, has seriously impacted me, but it overwhelmingly impacts women, no matter how high up we go. Most people at some point in their life will have at least one experience with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So, and also another interesting thing I found out about it as well is that people who are from so-called minority backgrounds, at least in this country, we're more likely to experience imposter syndrome as well because of things like racialized or racist experiences in the workplace, microaggressions that we might face on a daily basis.
Of course. Yeah. And it's really interesting that you said that because you're actually a writer and you're actually a blogger as well. So you write your own stuff, right? And even Maya Angelou, the great, actually spoke about imposter syndrome. She cites that she wrote 11 books, 11 books, and she was still thinking that someone was going to come and uncover her that, I'm not a great writer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's just to show you, no matter how much success, you'd assume that the more successful you become, you convince yourself that you're not an imposter anymore. But no, sometimes the imposter actually grows with you. And no matter how much you achieve, you just keep seeing yourself this way because, as I said, it is a psychological occurrence.
See, I didn't know that about my own. I didn't know that. And in a way, that is deeply comforting for somebody like me. And I know this is going to sound like this is, in essence, what I'm talking about. I'm here today. You've invited me here today, and I am here today, right? But even so, I still feel like a little bit of an imposter. On the way here, I was thinking, what makes me qualified to be here? What do I have to say? So that is essentially the essence of the imposterism, the feelings of imposterism associated with imposter syndrome, the feelings of inadequacy. And whether you are a writer or a blogger aspiring to greatness, on the road to greatness, or you are somebody, Maya Angelou, or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you'll still find yourself from time to time, fighting those feelings, which can be crippling, which is what I experienced.
So how did you sort of know that you had or you were experiencing imposter syndrome? Because it's not necessarily a diagnosis.
Yeah, it's not a
you
diagnosis.
were suffering from imposter syndrome. Take a tablet.
I wish. But I wish. No, well, in the past, I did a lot of mental health advocacy. So I've always been open on my platforms about mental health, my experiences with depression in the past. I am not depressed and not experiencing any of that now. But I do have regular therapy. So every week I go to see my therapist. I've been seeing her for years now. And she got me through some of the hardest moments in my life. So shout out to her. If she's listening, I'm sure she's not. But I
hope she is listening.
Well, maybe.
She'd be so proud of you.
I think she is proud of me, I think she is proud of me. When I had therapy this week, I mentioned that I was going to be doing this podcast with you, and she asked what I was going to be talking about, and I said imposter syndrome. She kind of listened, and I was saying the things I wanted to explore, the topics I wanted to explore with you today, and I saw like this glimpse of what I could only identify as pride. And I just was so touched. I was like, yes, she's rooting for me.
It's working.
It's working. But you did ask, you said, how did I come to discover? So what happened is it's a number of things, but basically I haven't really written until my latest blog post, which I published a couple of weeks ago, maybe. I haven't really written for the past 2 years. Now, there was an event that kind of triggered my withdrawal from my work, which was I was publicly attacked online by somebody who previously used to be quite close to me. That scared me. That freaked me out. It was the first time it had really happened to me. And I just completely didn't know how to deal with it. Now that was a trigger, but it isn't the cause. I think it just kind of triggered this landslide of very familiar, kind of almost ever-present feelings that have always been there, under the surface, which, kind of were telling me that I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. People are going to find out who I really am, how bad I really am. I'm not a good writer. I'm not brilliant. I'm a fraud. I'm presenting a side of myself that is not real. All of these things, which, if you think about it, is just like a fallacy. It's just a house of cards that crumbles once you really start to interrogate it. Because think about it, we all present a side of ourselves. We put our best foot forward in all things. It's normal. You go to a job interview, put your best foot forward. You sell yourself. You're on a podcast. I mean, sure, you can be as vulnerable as you want, but you're still not going to do some of the things you might do when you're at home. For example, if your partner's talking to you and you just zone out and get out your phone and start looking at it, you're not going to do that when you're on a podcast, right? You put your best foot forward. So, as I was saying, these thoughts are just nonsensical, really. They don't hold up to, vigorous investigation. But sorry, I digress. You said, how did I find out?
We'll come back to that.
It will come back to it. Yeah, okay. So we'll come back to how did I find out?
Yeah. Okay. No. We'll come back to
okay.
Of the house of cards.
Okay. So how did I find out? Because the past year's been struggling to write, just really struggling. And every week I would turn up in therapy. We'd explore different things. I'd make several false starts, and it just never stuck. And then eventually, we moved, just in December, we moved to, my husband and I and my 2 children, we moved to a beautiful home, a beautiful house in a very affluent area. And I started speaking to my therapist about how I felt like I didn't fit in. I was feeling like I don't belong here. This isn't, for me. This can't be my portion. How can I have, this life of ease, this, beautiful home, this, I walk down the shop and there's, I walk down the road, there's an organic shop. I walk just a few more meters down, there's this beautiful independent flower stand. It just felt like this life wasn't meant for me. And I mentioned that to my therapist about how I just felt so uncomfortable in my own new, beautiful home. And she said, when I look at what you're saying now and I examine what you're saying now, along with everything else you've said about why you can't write, it sounds like you're actually suffering from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And she said that. And, a couple of days later, I was sitting opposite a friend over coffee talking about how I felt about my new home, how I felt like I was such a fraud that, this couldn't really last. Yeah. Within 6 months, it would be taken away from me. And she said, this is imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So it was that, those two things made me kind of sit up a bit straighter and take a long, hard look at what was actually going on. And that's just a couple of months ago or so. And that's when I realized that's what was going on. And that, it was the catalyst for essentially my return to writing, to social media, trying to engage more in public life.
Yeah.
And trying to kind of put more into my career.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Let's take it back to like when you were younger. Like, did you have any sort of feelings or anything happening that made you think that, I'm not good enough, that those sort of feelings, or did you just have a normal, happy childhood, Zara, you're great, you're going to be amazing, it's going to be awesome?
Now, look, I was reading actually that imposter syndrome, the things that make people more vulnerable to experiencing imposter syndrome, it can depend on all sorts of external factors, including one's childhood experiences. Now, I don't want to speak about anything that involves anybody else.
Yes.
Because I think that also is what led to the experience I had a couple of years ago where I was
the online thing.
Yeah. But I will say this, my childhood was not all roses.
Yeah.
There was a lot of turmoil and chaos at home. There wasn't stability. There wasn't security at home. And I think, those things, including domestic violence, neglect or anything like that, those are categorized as an adverse childhood experience, which can severely impact a child's development and therefore their coping mechanisms as an adult. When I have looked at those lists, I have discovered that I score very highly on adverse childhood experiences, as I'm sure a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So I would say that the things I experienced in my childhood definitely contributed to a sense of unworthiness, a sense of low self-esteem, an unstable sense of self. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure who I should actually be. So all of those things definitely contribute and feed into imposter syndrome, for sure.
Yeah. But I think, one thing you said, sense of self, I'm under the impression that we sort of have two senses of self, obviously the one that we present outwardly and the one that's within us, As we're saying with imposter syndrome, you could have an amazing life, the house, the car, the kids, the picket fence, the amazing career, whatever. And it still doesn't change your perception of how you feel about yourself.
Sure.
As we said, external validation can be there, external evidence that no, like this is your life, it's true.
Yeah.
No one's coming to snatch it away from you, but there's that thing that keeps playing in your head, like, no, I'm not good enough, who am I to deserve this, that sort of thing. It's that negative self-talk. And, things can change around you physically, but if you don't change the perception of yourself that you have within,
100%,
you will continue to feed into that imposter.
Of course.
And I think you mentioned earlier that imposter syndrome is like a house of cards. It's almost like a smoke and mirrors.
Yes.
Like, the boogeyman almost, like, oh my God, they're coming to get you, that sort of thing, that it presents in your mind,
Yeah.
Or it could take shape like a little jester, a little cloud on your shoulder that's like, haha, look. And it could be the littlest thing, like, a negative comment online.
Oh, of course.
That can send you down
of course.
in a spiral,
Yes.
to another person. You'll just be like, oh, whatever. But if you're already struggling with those feelings just below the surface, it could just take one thing that someone said just to take you over.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think that's where the difference between imposter syndrome, which can impact everybody, that's where the difference is between that and feelings of low self-esteem come in, which is, I mean, I think that if you already have low self-esteem or, you know, a lack of self-confidence, you are more likely to experience imposter syndrome.
Because when things are changing in your outside world,
exactly,
the inside hasn't actually changed.
But I liked what you said about how you have to change the internal voice. Yeah. I do think you have to change the internal voice, but I think that's a bit like a chicken and egg situation. Yeah. Because a lot of people, we tell ourselves, I need to work on, you know, me, the inside. And once I've done that, I will be ready to go for that thing that I really want, to chase that dream. Well, actually, what I learned through therapy, but also through experience, that's actually not the way it works. Yeah. While you have that voice inside telling you you're not good enough, you have to learn to ignore it. Yeah. You ignore it. You say to that voice, yeah, right, shut up. Yeah. And you go for the thing. You know, I mean, I have to say, like, I just can only use myself as an example. I'll be completely honest. I don't necessarily feel ready to be here today. Yeah. Honestly, I'm sure, and I'm saying this, I'm being this open and honest because I'm sure, you know, in your audience, there will be lots of people who feel that way. You can't tell me they'll all feel like ready at the top of their game all the time. So I don't feel ready to be here today. I don't feel as though I'm qualified. You know, that I may know superficially, consciously, that I'm a good writer, that I can speak, that I'm relatable, that I can be honest, that I am more than comfortable being vulnerable. That's one thing. But what goes on inside, those voices that tell you you're not good enough, who are you to share your story? Who are you to sit on a podcast? Yeah. You know, all of those things. I still feel those things. But what I'm learning now, since I had that conversation with my therapist, that this is imposter syndrome, I've learned that I have to ignore those feelings. Oh. I have to feel the fear and do it anyway. Yes. Who's the person who said that? I don't remember. But you know the one I'm talking about. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I may never feel ready. I may never feel good enough, at least not in this period.
Even after 11 books, like Maya Angelou.
Even after 11 books. You know, even after some of the work I've done, and I'm not Maya Angelou, I might not feel ready. I might not feel good enough. But that doesn't mean that I'm not.
Exactly. Show up anyway.
Yeah.
As you are today. Thank you. Which is why I absolutely wanted to have you on here, because it's kind of like taking responsibility for your own, you know, self, you know, for where you want to be in life, you know. We're all going to struggle with imposter syndrome at some point. The large population are going to struggle with it, but it's like doing it anyway. You know? Yeah. Even if you don't feel ready, go for the job, you know. Go for the interview, you know. Yeah. Ask for the number. You know what I mean?
Ask for the number. I love that you said that. You know, because in my notes when I was preparing for this, I thought, I don't hear it talked about enough. Like when I look up imposter syndrome, when I was doing research on it, when my therapist mentioned it to me, I couldn't see much on imposter syndrome and relationships. But I feel like maybe we don't call it imposter syndrome, right? Maybe we call it low self-confidence, right? Yeah. Or low self-esteem. But when you say ask for the number, it just makes me think of relationships. One of the areas that I think that this imposterism, feelings of imposterism affected me were also in terms of relationships. Yeah. And I just think back to, you know, when I first met my husband. We have been together now for coming up to 10 years. 10 years. It's 10 years this year. Married for 5 or 6. Yeah. Sorry. You've been married for 6 years. Sorry, hubby. Sorry. You still I love you. Yeah. So, what was I saying? Yes. But I remember when I first met him. So I knew, and I always say this, I knew within about 10 minutes of meeting him, I knew he was the one. I just knew it. Like I had this sensation coursing through my body. It sounds so rude, but I could read this kind of aura coming from him. Like I felt this aura of warmth and kindness and goodness. And I knew.
Did he ask for the number?
He asked for the number. Girl. He asked for the number. But I knew he was the one. But, you know, the beginning of our relationship was filled with a lot of bumps and obstacles. And I think looking back, a lot of that was down to me feeling like this man was just too good. me. Like, he was so good.
Where do you find them?
Where do you find them? He was so good and so kind, and just, he has proven to be everything that I could ever wished for in a man, but also as the father to my children. That it was almost as though I didn't feel I deserved it. I didn't feel that I deserved somebody who was that good to me. I've had relationships.
To find it so easily as well, because
I've kissed some frogs, okay?
Well, I've
kissed some frogs.
Kissing the frogs, like, you could say, you find them quite early in life. You had your children quite early in life, I mean, I don't know how old you are.
I say I'm 35.
I'm 35. I like that.
I'm 35. Okay.
But, with a lot of women, so you're, trying to get married and have kids before 30. If you haven't gotten married and have kids by 30, you're a write-off. Something wrong with you. That sort of thing. So, with a lot of women just saying, why is it so hard to find a man, and dating problems, like, kissing frogs at 45, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. Could that, like, have played into it? Like, what? Like, how come? Like, Prince Charming just comes and I just know with his brilliant aura and...
Well, I'll tell you this, like, and I've had a conversation like this quite recently with, my best friend, where we were talking about when you decide about what you want in life. I think we were talking a little bit earlier about fear and feelings of low self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
And how even when you have those feelings, you have to go for the thing anyway.
Yeah.
I think with my relationship, it was a little bit like that, in that before my husband, I had relationships, people I was in love with, a couple of partners that I had thought I would spend my life with, and I was deeply in love with them.
Yeah.
But those relationships, in some ways, emotionally abusive. Some became verbally abusive. In the past, I think of a boyfriend from, when I was much, much younger, even became a bit physically abusive. And I think, when you have either whether you have or haven't grown up with, instability and chaos at home as I did, if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, that pattern can repeat itself over and over again. And so I had this kind of reckoning, just before I met my husband, where even though I had these deep-seated feelings of inadequacy, which have plagued me up until now, I realized I had to do something different. I've always had this thing about me, even though I've had low self-esteem and, feelings of imposterism. I've always had this part of me, this voice as well, that has said, no, but I know I deserve more. I know I deserve more. And I think in all areas of your life, whether it's, relationships, platonic friendships, work, at some point you have to decide that you deserve more, even if at the same time, because two things can be true at once. You can feel inadequate, but you can also know that you deserve more. And we all deserve to live the life of our dreams. So I think, when I met my husband, I was at that turning point that I knew, at least in a romantic relationship, I deserved more. And so I kind of, and this is what I was explaining to my best friend, I had, like I guess you could call it like a checklist of all the things I wanted. I wanted a man who was, kind. I wanted somebody who's God-fearing. I wanted somebody who valued family, who was a hard worker, who was respectful to others. And although, that initial conversation with my husband was just 10 minutes long, as I said, I felt an aura. I knew those things to be true. I knew it. I lived with my mother at the time. I went home and I told her, I think I just met my husband. I seriously told her.
I'm going to be moving out soon.
I said, bye. Bye-bye. So, that's what happened with him. But, bringing that same ethos into other areas of your life, it's one of the reasons why I'm here today.
Deciding you want more.
No, I want more. And that's kind of like my thing now. I want more. And I know so many of us do. And so many of us are afraid to say, I want more. I want it all. I want it all. I really do. And I'm telling you now, I'm going to get it all. I am. Because why not?
Yeah.
If not me, then who?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that. Like, I love how much fire came from you when you said that. I want more.
I want more.
I demand more.
100%.
You know? And that's the way we should approach everything in life. I think there's so much like, who does she think she is?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Like, you know, you need to calm down.
Calm down.
You know, what are you doing to the table? You're doing too much. All of that kind of stuff. Oh, she's trying to do this now. Okay. That sort of thing. And again, it really does play into the imposter syndrome if you are getting this kind of feedback or it's not very well received when somebody believes in themselves, for goodness sake. So it kind of does teach you, stay humble now.
It really does.
Remember what happened to so-and-so?
Yeah,
they got cancelled.
It does.
They thought too much of themselves.
It does. And you just said, when you put yourself out there, basically, and you declare an intention with any sort of confidence, there will be people around you, whether it's online or within your family or friendship network, that will make you feel as though you're doing something wrong. They'll kind of try to trip you up. Maybe you're fortunate enough not to experience that, but a lot of us will. Yes. And have. I have. Exactly. You have. It's just a part of the course, it's part of the territory. But what I've learned is that, as I said, I was attacked online 2 years ago. It was, a horrible experience. It made me want to disappear. It was horrific. And it seriously threw me off. And if that should happen again, well, I've been through it once, it is what it is. There's a saying that says, if you don't have haters, then you're doing it wrong.
Oh, yes.
So,
I'm doing something right. Where the haters at?
Where the haters at? You know what I mean? At this point, I think if you stick your head above the parapet at all, there are always going to be people who will criticize.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is, if you are vulnerable, or if you let those criticisms affect you, if you let them get past skin deep, then yes, you will shrink. You will make yourself smaller, and you will want to disappear.
Yeah. I've got this saying that I say, and it says, observe, but do not absorb. You don't need to take the negativity in and, feed it in through your veins and your blood, and it's all throughout you. Just observe it. Okay, I see you.
Yes.
I see you there.
Yes.
But I'm not going to absorb this. I'm not going to internalize this and now, make it start making decisions for me. Okay.
Yes.
I'm not going to make a post now because somebody's going to attack me. I'm not going to take action because somebody's going to say I'm not good enough. Somebody's going to uncover that I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And just as you said, take the action anyway.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time when we do actually push ourselves and take the action, something good always comes.
Something good always comes of it. And you never know who you might be helping just by, telling your story. You really, that's one thing I realized, years ago, a few years back when I started this whole thing, when I started writing and, getting on social media and speaking in different places and stuff. Well, speaking in different places, that's overstating it. But speaking.
Overstated.
Okay.
Overstated.
Do you see? Okay.
Yes.
You see what I mean about we always feel we have to make ourselves smaller.
Overstated.
So that people won't say, oh, who does she think she is? Yeah, when I started doing that.
For my name's sake, you do that.
Yeah.
Do that.
Okay, girl. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
You can get it right.
Yeah. You're right, yeah. I've lost my train of thought, but we were talking
about speaking.
Yeah. Still can't remember.
I'm sure you get this all the time. I'm probably going to take this to another arena, but I'm sure you get this over time, all the time, that you're very well spoken. I think you even said it at the beginning of this podcast. You know you can speak.
Yeah.
You know you can write.
Yeah.
And isn't it a shame that maybe perhaps some speakers that are not as good as you, or some writers that are not as good as you? I'm sure you've read some articles and be like, who the hell is responsible for this? Who is responsible for this? Who did this?
Of course.
Why was that allowed?
This
day and age of self-publishing, just letting anybody in here. And it's just like, if you don't release what you have within you, people are forced to read that nonsense. People are forced to consume this content. Yeah. And it's kind of like, you know, that's the way you need to see it, because it's not really about you and the way you feel about yourself and your self-image. You're giving to help other people, you know? Think of the people that you might help rather than how you feel, you know, a few haters in the comments or whatever, you know? I was talking to someone the other day, actually, and I was posting a video on TikTok, and I was like, oh, I don't necessarily know if the TikTok did well unless there's some arguments in the comments. That's how you know. You know, if they ain't attacking me on the TikTok,
I'm gonna do you right.
That's my metric.
I love that.
You know, if there's no argument, no controversy in the comments,
I'm gonna take a look.
You know, so you need to almost look for that. You know, say something. Okay, I released my post. Say something.
Say something. It's true, and I think, you know, that's definitely something I've experienced. I feel, you know, I have a lot of essays on my laptop. I have published a fraction of them. I have not actually sought out larger platforms to publish my work. And that comes down to being afraid, and also being afraid to be controversial. But the things that resonate most deeply with an audience are the things that are controversial. It's when we say the things that everybody else is too afraid to say. So, I mean, I've been holding myself back from that because I'm afraid to make waves. I'm literally just speaking honestly, because I know there isn't a single person out there who doesn't know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. You know what I mean? This is such a unifying, universal human experience. But yeah, I mean, it's something that it's on my agenda going forward. I guess I really do want it all for myself. I really do. Yeah. And I know that in order to get there, I do have to, I guess, feel the fear and do it anyway. Yeah. Public criticism, or even, you know, in the microcosm of criticism that can kind of reverberate throughout families and friendship groups, that's neither here nor there. And another thing, Zara, you know, when people talk about how your friends don't necessarily support you, they might criticize you. Of course you've experienced that. Secret haters. But this is my philosophy. Your friends are not your fans. Yes. You know, friends can be your fans, but you're looking for something bigger than the 20 or so people you know, right? Exactly. The 20 or so people you call your family and friends. Yeah. Do we not want to reach beyond that?
Critical acclaim. Yeah.
Critical acclaim. Excuse me. We're talking millions. Yeah. Not, you know, the 20 or so people on your friends and family, on your close friends list. Yeah. So
we're doing big work here.
Trying to.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of grabbing that, you know, imposter by the neck. It's about kicking that bitch off the cliff. You know what I'm saying?
That bitch. Yeah. Drop kick that bitch.
Because otherwise you're staying small, you know? You're staying small, and what a life to have lived, where, you know, wow, I've got all these things that I wanted to do. Yeah. You know, I mean, even well done for even writing them in the first place, because a lot of people have all of these ideas and not even get that far as to even write it. But now it's kind of like the next step, where it's just like, yeah, I need to be ready for this. Like, are you ready for the attention? You know, because sometimes it's not even the fear of like failing or getting rejected by like, you know, publishing houses or other companies. Sometimes it's actually the fear of success. Oh my God.
Oh,
wow, I actually did it. Like, wow. Sometimes you know they're going to say yes. Sometimes you know they're going to bring you in. And you want to stay small because it's safer. I think I put something on my Instagram about self-sabotage.
Girl.
You know?
Me, self-sabotage. Me, a whole self-saboteur right here. No, I mean, you know, what you said, the fear of success, definitely. I mean, I've been staring this beast in the face for a long time. And so I'm very self-aware. If there's one person I know, it's myself. Okay, I may not be an expert on anything else, but I'm an expert on myself. And I can tell you now, self-sabotage, check, absolutely. And the fear of success, yes. And this is a crazy thing about me. And again, I'm almost afraid to say it because I think I'm so used to making myself small so that people like me or approve of me, so that I don't ruffle any feathers, but I'm going to say it. I don't think I've ever done anything in my life. I don't think I've ever tried to do anything in my life and failed at it. Sure, I failed at a lot of things, but that's when I didn't really try hard enough. So there is this part of me that self-sabotages, you know, a great deal, because staying here is my comfort zone. Staying small is my comfort zone. Being, Zara Oteng with, just over 1,500 followers on Instagram, and who, can, publish a blog post when I choose, without anybody, knocking on my door and saying, come on, where's the rest of it?
Yeah.
That's comfortable.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And even back to what we were talking about earlier on, when I was saying we moved to an affluent area, and there was, this big house and all this ease, that I wasn't familiar with that. That's not my comfort zone. As I said, I grew up in chaos and turmoil. God bless both of my parents. They did the best they could. They really did. But I grew up in chaos and I grew up in turmoil. Okay? And you can think of all the things that might encompass. I had it. So I wasn't used to this life of ease and comfort where things should be easy for me and my children, where I can walk down the street and just, there's an organic shop just there, a Whole Foods and organic shop, and there's a flower store just there. I wasn't used to any of that. I digress again. I do that, but back to what we were talking about, the fear of success. Yes, that's what I was saying. The fear of success in all things. The fear of the natural progression in life, being out of my comfort zone, where my comfort zone, I guess, what is most familiar to me is emotional distress, turmoil, and struggle. Being in a place where, I can essentially, let's say, for example, I choose to pitch my work to a huge platform, and they say, yes, what? Then what? Then what?
Then what?
Then what? How dare I?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think about the life I want to lead, and it feels like I'm just on the cusp of achieving it. And I know the only thing that's stopping me is me. It's the fear of success and the imposter syndrome. That, if I dare to kind of put myself where there's any spotlight, they will discover how bad I really am, how much of a fraud I really am.
You don't deserve this. What are you doing in this neighborhood?
Yeah. Oh wow.
Who really wrote this article? Let's check around. Oh, okay. Only 1,000 followers on Instagram, and she calls herself a writer.
Yeah.
All those sort of negative things. So do you think that even like with the small amount of trolls that have come online and tried to attack you, or you mentioned that earlier thing of, but people get trolls. The higher you get, the more the trolls. Right?
Yeah, of course.
Do you think it's that fear of like the trolls increasing? Like, will I be able to, just that the way the comment led you down the slippery slope of I'm not writing anymore. Even if I write, I'll just leave it here. We're not going to knock on any publishing houses. I'll just stay small.
Yeah.
Do you think that it would lead you to, or there's that fear of going down that path again if you are to gain more success? Will I be able to handle all of that? Look how negatively I responded with, somebody saying something bad. If I do become successful, that's going to, as controversial as he might be, I absolutely love Kanye West. I don't give a fuck what never listen. I don't give a fuck what you know. I love Kanye.
I know, I imagine what you must love about him.
Yeah. I love that. It's the self-confidence.
Yeah.
It's the audacity.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And I think it's almost like that controversy, the trolls, will you be able to handle like all of that when you do see someone being like publicly, humiliated or demonized, putting all sorts of labels on it to him or that sort of thing. Do you think it's that fear as well, like not being able to handle that level of like
scrutiny, criticism? I think I'm past the point. I think when I wasn't writing and when I wasn't doing things like this, like coming to speak,
you're doing it to yourself anyway when you're not writing,
100%. Yeah, you're your biggest tormentor. I think, yes, I still do that fear of, criticism, of being attacked, of being humiliated. You said it. That's what it is, the public humiliation. Yes, that fear is still present, but I am past the point of caring enough to allow it to quell my voice, put it that way. So it's no longer going to silence me. And, yes, the attacks came in the past from, camps close to home. there is definitely a real fear that that could happen again. And there is the fear, I do experience the fear that if I become, if I do more forward-facing, public-facing work, that, that criticism could come, thick and fast. But this is why I said earlier that imposter syndrome is a house of cards, because it doesn't bear up to close scrutiny. Our faves all face extreme criticism, sometimes unfounded criticism, and they're still there. They're still our idols. Now, I make no secret of the fact that I absolutely love Beyonce. She's all over my Instagram all the time. I love Beyonce. We grew up with Beyonce. What's not to love, as far as I'm concerned? Beyonce has people all over social media, all over her internet, talking about how she can't sing. She can't sing.
Who said that?
People say she can't sing. This ain't a country album. She's not a good musician. She can't dance. All of this kind of nonsense. I mean, do you think she allows them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. She doesn't allow them past, I don't know, the outer gate. And so, when I think of people like her or, any kind of person or mentor or idol I may look up to, I'm sure they don't allow critics to get in the way of them pursuing their dreams, to stop them publishing their work. Well, I can't allow them either. And, Beyonce was once a young girl or a young woman who had a dream. She wasn't always the Beyonce that we know now. So we all have to start somewhere.
Exactly. It's just one step at a time.
One step at a time.
As you said, just not even letting it even get to you at all.
I mean,
you literally have to train yourself to become bigger than it, because no matter how high you climb, there's going to be a new demon. There's going to be a new troll. There's going to be a new devil that you need to overcome.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, it does get to me.
Yeah.
It does get to me. It is something that I feel and agonize about. Criticism. I'm a very sensitive person. I know I come across as extremely confident. And in many ways, I am confident. But I'm also extremely sensitive. I'm very sensitive, and I have struggled with low self-esteem for a long time. And it has held me back in many ways. But I don't want it to hold me back anymore. And I suppose that's one of the reasons I'm here talking about this. Yeah. But you said something earlier that I really wanted to talk about. And I hope I'm not jumping around too much. Just let me know if I am. You talked about friends. Yeah. And friends being haters. And it's just, I didn't necessarily want to talk about friends being haters. But one thing I did want to talk about is how, for me, imposter syndrome showed up in my friendships. Or at least it's what I like to think of as imposter syndrome showing up in my relationships. You could call it low self-esteem showing up in friendships. So I think I realized low self-esteem affected me in so many areas of my life. Yeah. But one thing I've been really examining in the past year or so is how it determined who I was in my friendships. Yeah. And I think one of the things I realized is that I didn't feel that I deserved supportive and reciprocal friendships. And that's something I'm working on now. Yes. And it has been so difficult experiencing friendships that didn't nurture me in the way I nurture other people. Now, I don't think friendships are always going to be 50-50. Absolutely not. I don't think it's about tit for tat. Yes. But I do think that I show up in a friendship as a loving person. I am certainly kind. Don't get me wrong, I make mistakes, but I'm able to take accountability for those mistakes, and I'm able to make up for those mistakes. And I think those are the foundations of, a good relationship, any relationship, right? But what I realized is I wasn't demanding that from friends. It's not even demanding it. It's that it wasn't an expectation for me. So when I saw red flags in relationships, for example, people who had no degree of accountability, could never accept responsibility and make up for what they had done, done wrong. Yeah, I just ignored it. And essentially those things would then rear their heads later on. When you should have dealt with it at the time. But that was because I was so, eager to be loved. Yeah. I just wanted to be loved. Yeah, you said that earlier. Yeah. You wanted to be liked. Yeah. You want to be likable. You don't want to be that person to rock the apple cart. Not at all. Not at all. But now, it's funny, there's this side of me that's always Like one of my friend's husbands, she used to tell me that he would say, you know, I like Zara, she just doesn't give any fucks. She gives 0 fucks. But it's not true. I have plenty of fucks to give.
Plenty of fucks.
Plenty.
Yeah,
plenty. But I think there has always been that side of me that's like, I just, you know, I don't care if that's what that person says or if that's what they think, if that's what they think. But it was only superficial. It was only surface level. And I think I'm now coming to the point where I do care. I care, and I care a great deal. But I'm realizing that I am worth love and support and reciprocity. I am worth it.
And so many people are as well, you know. I think that's what makes this topic so powerful as well. Like, there's all of that internal dialogue going on within, where sometimes we don't think that we're worth love or even respect or a good, decent, healthy relationship or even a family or a good career. You know, some people, when they start making money, they start like, I don't deserve this money. Like some people, when they're like, you know, the first woman in an office, you know, the first black person in an office or whatever, like it's like, I don't deserve to be here. Like, you know, I'm a minority. Maybe they only hired me because, you know, they wanted the exceptional hire or whatever. And you start telling yourself all these stories, you know, maybe even self-sabotaging with money as well. Like, I need to get rid of it. I need to get rid of it. I need to start shopping or gambling or doing something to really, like, sabotage themselves.
Yeah.
Do you think that self-sabotage shows up more like when you're trying to do something more creative, like doing your own thing? Obviously, you're writing, you know, other people might be like content creators or YouTubers or like, I don't know, knitting cushions or whatever, compared to like just doing a vanilla job? Or is it like absolutely everyone that could suffer from imposter syndrome? Or is it more when you're trying to do your own thing? Like,
okay, I see what you're saying. So yeah, I think everybody can suffer from imposter syndrome, but I think there's a degree of exposure when you are doing your own thing.
Yeah.
You know, when you're doing something on your terms, where you have to, you know, break the mold and carve out a path for yourself, that exposes you in a way other things won't when you're, you know, working for somebody else, you know, doing a job that has been prescribed for you, where you're given a very clear mandate. That's not to say people in those positions don't experience imposter syndrome, because we know they do. Yeah. But I definitely think especially when you're doing something where you have to create, and I'm not saying that you have to create in terms of be a writer or be an artist. I mean, you have to create your own way. You have to forge your own path. Definitely, I think there is imposter syndrome there, because everything in our society is geared towards making, I mean, this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome. Because who am I? But anyway, No,
sorry.
I think everything is geared towards us being a cog in this great machine. So when you are trying to break out from the path that others have set for us, that others tell us,
what are you doing?
It's like, and you do experience that, you know, you experience those forces trying to compel you back into that box from your own family and friends. You know, what are you doing? This is, you know, you're straying off the beaten path. You know what I mean? You want to start your own business? You want to be a podcast host?
Don't do that.
You know, who are you? I mean, you know, I remember I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and I didn't realize at the time what the comment meant to me. But, you know, she was asking me what I did, and I was saying I'm a writer. Never mind that I've constantly thought, who am I to call myself a writer? Because I haven't published a book. Never mind the fact that that little unhelpful thought has been there. So I was telling her I'm a writer, and she was asking, you know, where she can find my work, and I told her. And then she said, "Oh, do you know Yomi Adegoke?" Who is a writer, who has published a book. And I was like, yeah, that's great. But I didn't realize why she was, I didn't realize how unhelpful that comment was at the time. And I'm sure she meant well. 100%. But, you know, bringing up another author's published work when I am talking about writing, you know, it's these kind of innocuous comments that people make that can make you feel small in that moment. But as I said before, that's just part of the course. It's just part of the course. And there are those kind of, just innocent conversations that we have that aren't meant to do anything. They're just conversations. And then there are people who can actually tell you, you're crazy for doing what you're doing. Yeah. Why are you saying that? Why are you talking about that? I've experienced that. People ask me, well, why are you talking about this? Yeah. It doesn't affect just you. Yeah. So, it's...
Yeah. You'd think that something that's as common as imposter syndrome is, it's not worth talking about. But I think it absolutely is worth talking about because it affects so many people and more people that are willing to admit it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And some people may not even have a name for it. Yeah. They may know that they experience those feelings of, oh my God, whoa, are they going to find out? Whoa, that sort of thing. But they don't actually have a name for it, Yes. And I think sometimes when some people are talking, they are just trying to find a connection with, like you said, the girl. And like, oh, do you know this person? Like, sort of thing. They're just trying to find a connection.
Oh, exactly. Okay. Common ground.
Yes, wrote a book also. Yes. Do you know J.K. Rowling?
No, but I'd like to. Yeah. No, I wouldn't like to know.
Actually. Oh my God. I was going to ask you, do you think motherhood exacerbates imposter syndrome or not?
No, I think it can do.
Yeah.
And I think that is because of the very impossible expectations that our society has of mothers. Yeah. So sure, if you can't meet those expectations, of course you're going to feel like you're not doing it right. Therefore, you must be an imposter.
Yeah.
Because who are you to, post something on the gram of your children smiling happily beside you, while, in the back there's 5 loads of unwashed washing, and you've just had an argument with your husband. I don't know. So yeah, I definitely think so. As a position, when you're a mother, our position in society is very much elevated in some ways. There's this, elevated, revered status once you're a mother, but there is a lack of support. Yeah, you're a mother. It's very wholesome, but there's a lack of support. Yeah. So, you're supposed to take care of these children, keep them alive, keep them clean, keep them looking good, educate them, do all of these wholesome activities with them, but there's a lack of support.
Yeah.
And then, exactly. And then you're supposed to keep the home clean. Okay. And then you're supposed to have a career. God help you be a, stay-at-home mother, as I have been, Yeah. So there are all of these expectations on us. Oh, also, you're supposed to be sexy. You're supposed to look good.
Don't forget that part.
And if you don't, so
she's let herself go. She's off for a couple of kids,
But then if you're too sexy, I wrote about this before. If you're too sexy, God,
she needs to settle down.
She needs to settle down.
What is that?
Yeah, it's just
after having kids, she's still riding up that skirt.
Exactly. There's just all of these double standards, and there's a lot of hypocrisy, and there's a lot of impossible to meet expectations on us as women. And I definitely think, it can exacerbate imposter syndrome if you've already suffered from it, or it can make you experience it.
Bring up some feelings from the past, perhaps.
100%.
Unworthiness or not feeling safe.
Oh yeah.
Not feeling like you deserve the life that you actually really, really want, because it's so close. Use this word earlier, sometimes you feel like you're on the cusp, You're on the cusp, and it feels like, you're so close to what you want. You've got that vision of exactly what you want to achieve. I want to do this. I know what it takes to get there. I know how long it's going to take. I know what it's going to take out of me, physically, mentally, whatever. But it's just about going and attacking that bit.
Yeah.
Are you going to attack it like a lion, or are you going to attack it like a little pussycat?
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. I always feel that we are, whenever we're doing, it's not that I believe everything happens for a reason, but I often get this feeling that I'm in the place I'm meant to be at the time I'm meant to be there. And I feel like that today, Zara, that I'm meant to be here for a reason. Because, I had a conversation again with my best friend, and we were saying, we need to have a goal setting, day where we're just setting our goals, and we didn't go ahead with it. We had to reschedule because of various things. But one of the things that played into it is we were saying, both of us were saying, I don't even know what my goals are. And I think with me, on the one hand, I have some very clearly defined goals, but I also feel like because I have played small for so long, I feel like there is an expression of self that hasn't quite happened yet. And I have this craving to express myself through my various talents that I have never fully allowed myself to realize because of fear, because of feelings of, low self-worth, a lack of self-worth, because of not wanting to put myself out there for criticism.
Yeah.
And so I'm at a stage in my life that, yes, I'm a writer, and one of my goals is, for example, to write a book, but also I want to express myself creatively in so many other ways. I'm very interested in fashion. I would love to make something out of that. Don't ask me what, but I would love to make something out of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm good at speaking. I like speaking. I like talking. I like conversing with people. I'm very, very comfortable speaking about difficult things where a lot of people don't like to be vulnerable. I'm more than happy to do that because I think we all have vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put myself in a box. I know that in this day and age, the idea of branding yourself, finding a niche, I know those things are so important, but I also feel like I've played small for so long.
Yeah.
I have not realized myself fully. And it's something that is very high up on my agenda now.
Yeah. So would you say that in order to sort of set further goals for yourself, you need to first accomplish the smaller goals that you haven't sort of fully realized yet? Because it's all good and well saying, you know what, I want to make 5 million by the end of the year, right? Well, if you haven't even made the 1 million now, or the 100,000 or whatever, I mean, no one's saying you're not going to get there, but, you need to first learn how to make the 1 million, then the 2 million, then the 3.
I mean, I think, sure, that sounds like sound advice, right?
Yeah.
But there's also, I don't know who said it, don't ask me, but somebody said, if your dreams aren't scaring you, then they're not big enough.
Yeah.
And this idea of being realistic, I don't believe in being realistic.
Yeah.
Because if I was realistic, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be living the life that I'm living today if I was realistic. Because, I don't know, 10 years ago, it was looking peak. Okay? It wasn't looking good. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it wasn't looking bright. But I'm here and my life is very different to where it was 15 years ago. So I think that, yes, there's something to be said about, learning to walk before you run. But I don't think that is necessarily important unless you're doing something like running a business, in which case you do need to get the basics right. Yeah. I think dare to dream. Dare to dream and the rest will fall into place. Dare to dream, work hard, work damn hard, be consistent and put yourself out there. And also I think, especially in this day and age, we're living in a digitalized age. There's social media. Anything you put out there will live for eternity, potentially. So I think you have to be able to make mistakes in full view of the world. You have no other choice, unless you want to stay away from social media, stay away from the internet, in which case you're making achieving your dreams that much harder. So I think, be prepared. At least I think I'm more prepared than ever to fall flat on my face in full view of the public. And why shouldn't I be? Because, when I see public figures make mistakes, I don't think about it. I don't go home and think about it. Exactly. It might be, a very brief conversation. It might be something I might even laugh over with a friend, but it's not something I think about forever and ever and ever. It doesn't.
Remember that time when?
Nobody really cares. And that's why I said, again, imposter syndrome is a house of cards because nobody cares that much. There are a few crazies out there who care. I feel bad saying that, especially considering the amount of, mental health advocacy I've done in the past, but you know what I mean, okay? There are some people out there who will pass through every mistake you've made, who will highlight that.
We can't focus on that.
We can't focus on them because they're nobodies. Yeah. They're nobodies.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to focus on who you're helping rather than who's trying to take you down.
Yeah. And also, the pursuit of your own dreams, the pursuit of your own goals and the realization of them, it might seem like a very, self-focused thing to do. The pursuit of your goals, of greatness, of your dreams, might seem like a very self-focused focused thing to do, but it does have an outwardly rippling effect. It inspires others to pursue their goals. And I see that all the time. I see that even the way I react to the friends I see who are pursuing their goals. When I see my friends who are really on their shit, I'm like, yeah, baby. Yeah, girl. And I feel inspired. And I know that when my friends see me on my shit, they feel inspired. So, you know, when we see somebody who comes from nothing and climbs all the way to the top in the pursuit of their goals, it tells the rest of us that we can do it too. And that's a good thing.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Zara, for joining us on Ignite Your Light. You can contact Zara at Zara Oteng on Instagram. You can also read her blog posts as well at zaraoteng.com.
Thank you.
As well. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. You have no idea. I know you've inspired so many people out there that are listening or watching this. Once again, if you have struggled with imposter syndrome at all, feel free to reach out to myself, Zara. I'm a certified life coach. Oh, you can hit up Zara as well in her DMs on Instagram. Holla at her. Yeah. Okay, she's got.
Come on over.
Thank you
so much, Zara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the end of podcast 2.